Okay, Reinhardt.
Hey, good evening. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Mr. Roberts, will you please call the roll? I still hear an echo. You
Yeah.
guys hear an echo?
Yes, we do.
I could try to mute everybody again and figure out how to do that. And then the board members need to unmute.
Okay, so you,
I just muted everybody, so board members, you'll need to unmute as we go.
please call the roll.
Mr. Felkoff,
Here.
Mr. Colang, can you unmute?
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Peloton,
Here.
Mr. Sermon,
Here.
Ms. Choka Urban,
Here.
and Chairman Schneider.
Here. This meeting is being conducted remotely via Microsoft Teams. For those watching this video in the future, the state of Illinois is currently under the stay-at-home order issued by Governor J.B. Pritzker due to the coronavirus global pandemic. As a result, all in-person governmental meetings have been canceled. However, the Open Meetings Act now permits electronic meetings of governmental bodies like the Zoning Board of Appeals. And this evening, we are conducting our business via in compliance with the state law. As usual, this meeting is being broadcast live on our local cable access channel 6. It is also being broadcast on the internet on YouTube Live, and on the URL for that is www.youtube.com/user/village-of-Wilmette/live. To participate in the meeting, you can join through Microsoft Teams. Visit the village's website at www.wilmette.com and find the calendar event for the zoning board meeting. There's a link for you to join the meeting. You will also find the meeting agenda and case reports under the calendar. Alternatively, you can view the meeting on channel 6 or on YouTube and call to the meeting, allowing you to listen and speak using your telephone. The phone number is 872-239-8225. You guys all hear an echo?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's disturbing. Is everybody on mute except me?
Reinhardt, I'll try to mute again if we, and then you can, okay?
What's that?
I thought I would try to mute all and then you could unmute and keep going if that's okay.
Okay. Let's try it. Now I've unmuted myself, but that doesn't help. I'll try to proceed. Tonight's meeting code is 956-732-188#. You may also submit your comments through YouTube Live and emails to comdev@wilmette.com. A member of the village staff will read your comment to the zoning board. All comments to the Zoning Board of Appeals will be recorded in the meeting minutes as we typically do. For our meeting guests joining by Teams, when you are not speaking, please keep your device muted to minimize disruption, and your video turned off so that the board members can be seen. For those of you new to our proceedings, the purpose of this board is to hear evidence on applications for variances from our zoning ordinance and on applications for special use. Based on the evidence we hear this evening, we will make a recommendation to the Village Board of Trustees as to whether the applications that come before us this evening should be granted or denied. We will vote to recommend granting or denying each application for variation based on whether the application meets the standards of review as set forth in section 5.4.f of our village ordinance. Applications for special use will be considered based on whether the standards of review set forth in sections 5.3.e of our village ordinance are met. The Village Board of Trustees will consider the recommendations we make this evening at the next regularly scheduled meeting on October 13th of this year. Our recommendations to the board are advisory only. The Village Board has final say on all applications and will make its determination as to whether to grant or deny them. The Village Board is not legally bound by our recommendations. There's one small exception to this rule. If this board makes a negative recommendation with respect to an application, in order for the Village Board of Trustees to approve that application, a supermajority of 5 Village Board members must vote to approve it rather than a simple majority of 4. Also, this board does not operate by majority vote. We operate instead by whether we require at least 4 members to approve. So no matter how many board members are present, we need at least 4 members with a positive recommendation, for a positive recommendation. Tonight we have 6 members. And since we don't have all 7 with us tonight, we give the applicants who are scheduled to come before us tonight the option of requesting a continuance to the next available date on our schedule. The next available date for any applicant who would like to request a continuance this evening is October 7th of this year. There's no penalty for asking for a continuance. No such request will be held against you when your case is eventually heard. If you wish to ask for a continuance, however, you must do so at the beginning of your presentation before making any substantive arguments as to the merits of your case. Please also be aware that if you request a continuance, there's no guarantee as to how many board members will be present on the evening to which your case is continued. The cases we shall hear this evening will be heard in the order set forth on the published agenda which has been modified, and we will talk about that later slightly. The order has been changed a little bit. When your case is called, please state your name and address. Tell us exactly why your application meets the standards of review that are applicable to it. Each member of this board is a longtime resident of the village and has visited your property during the past week. In addition, we have received from village staff a report containing all written information that you have submitted in support of your application, as well as any other correspondence that the village has received. Accordingly, it's not necessary that you repeat what you have already stated in writing. Please just hit the high points with particular attention to why you believe your application meets the standards of review. After the applicant has had a chance to speak, we will open the floor to others who wish to speak on the application. I will recognize each attendee to ask if you have any comment. So please wait to be called. Everyone will be permitted to have their say, though we would ask that you keep your comments as short and to the point as possible. Any comments received through the YouTube chat, Teams chat, or email will be read into the record at that time. After we have heard all oral presentations, I will close the evidence and the members of the board will discuss what they have heard and take a vote. Once the evidence is closed, no further testimony on an application may be offered. The only people entitled to speak during that part of the proceedings will be the members of the board. This meeting is a legal proceeding and all testimony tonight must be given under oath. If you are here planning to testify tonight, I would ask you to raise your right hand this time and be sworn. Do you swear or affirm that you will tell the truth in the testimony that you're about to give? If so, please say I do.
I do.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Roberts, I think we're ready for the
I do.
first case. Thank you.
Yes, we've had a slight modification to the agenda. So the first case tonight is going to be 2020 C28 305 Wilshire Drive. The applicant is here.
You're on.
Okay, this is John Glennon from 305 Wiltshire Drive West in Wilmette, and I'd like to request a continuance, please, for our item to be heard next time around.
So you're requesting
number 2020Z-28 to October 7th, 2020.
Yes.
I'll second that.
Hey, Ms. Roberts, can you please take a vote?
Yes. Mr. Felkoff. Nope. Sorry, don't forget to unmute.
Yes.
Mr. Colang.
Yes.
Mr. Pellegrin.
Yes.
Mr. Sermon.
I'm sorry, you said me?
Yes.
Yes. Couldn't hear.
Lisa, are you still there? Lisa, you're frozen, I think.
Yeah, she appears to be frozen. That's a new one.
Okay,
Now she's unfrozen.
there we go. Sorry about that. Mr. Sermon, please.
Yes.
Ms. Chook Urban.
Yes.
Chairman Schneider.
Yes. So with that, this case will be postponed until October 7th. Thank you very much for coming to us. So are we ready for the next case, Ms. Roberts?
Yes. The next case is 2020 Z27, 33 Canterbury Court. This is a request for a 2-foot fence height variation to permit the construction of a 6-foot tall open replacement fence in a front yard. The applicant is us.
Is the applicant here?
Yes.
Is it Mr. Crown?
Yes,
Yes.
it's David Crown, 33 Canterbury Court. You all hear me?
I will put myself on mute as well.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity to present the request. As was stated, we're requesting a 2-foot height variance on a fence along the edge of the property on Sheridan Road that was damaged in a windstorm earlier this summer. And the 6-foot height is desired for security and privacy from the heavy traffic on Sheridan Road, and also matches the 6-foot height of the fence along the property line in the Evanston portion of our property. So that's the basic request. I guess a couple of background points that I'd just like to go over quickly. My family moved to Canterbury Court in 1954. The original wood stockade fence was built in the 1950s. That was a 6-foot high fence. In 1998, my mother filed a height and openness variance request to replace the wood fence with a like fence. The result of that petition was approval of the height variance, but not the openness variance. And I think there's a lengthy record of that earlier petition in the documents. At least it was sent to me, and it was interesting to see. And in response to that, my mother planted bushes behind the original stockade fence and did not replace it. She passed away in 2015, and in that year, we replaced the Evanston portion of the stockade fence with a wood stockade fence. They have different regulations. And so the request is basically to have consistency with what the finding was in 1998 and allow us to keep the fence height at 6 feet along that edge of the property. And again, the basis for it is the high pedestrian, bike, car, ambulance traffic along Sheridan Road. There's quite a bit of noise that the fence helps bar. Also, the topography of the property, it slopes down, so someone walking at Sheridan Road is almost at the second floor level of the house. And that was all documented in the 1998 case. And I think those are the main points I'd like to make. I'm happy to answer questions or provide more detail if that's useful.
Please, any board members want to ask a question? You have to unmute yourself, John.
So what are the security issues here?
Well, it's the line of sight into it's the side yard of the property, and
This is going to be an open fence, right?
The request is for an open fence. We did plant bushes on the inside of the fence shortly after the 1998 petition, and the idea is we would grow vines and do other landscaping on the fence to at least provide a partial screen that will help buffer the noise and also lines of sight.
Will it be go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, let me follow up on John's question. This is going to, I assume this is going to be something like a wrought iron fence?
It's a metal, the fence that we selected is a metal fence, and it's a wire fence technically, and the idea by selecting that style is that it would facilitate the growth of vines on it.
All right, so the fence itself doesn't provide anything other than a base for foliage, which is made up of the bushes that are there, along with vines that you intend to plant.
In terms of size, yes. I mean, someone is going to have a harder time if they're trying to climb over a 6-foot fence versus a shorter one.
As you get to, I want to sort of picture it if I can. At the top of your street, there is a stone entrance. Will you be connected to that stone entrance?
It would, the current fence is 6 foot along the property line and then slopes down toward that stone monument. And the idea would be just to replace with the 6 foot high fence to the margin of the monument.
Okay. And then I assume then you're going to leave all of the current foliage that's there?
Yes, that's on the current foliage is, except for I think one, the current foliage is all on the inside of the fence.
Right. And that is all going to remain?
Yes, and I mean, some of it is not done all that well, but the idea is not to change that this time.
Right. And then behind the log cabin, if you're driving down Sharon Road, you can actually see the back of the log cabin. Is there a fence to the west of the log cabin, or is that right now fenceless?
That's what fell down in the storm. So there were two panels. There were 2 panels of the old fence that fell down in the storm earlier this summer, and that's the impetus for putting in the request, is to go ahead and, you know, that part of the fence in Wilmette is 60+ years old, and it's time to replace it.
Can I, Brad, are you finished or do you have
Yes,
more?
please go ahead.
So I have a question. Am I correct in assuming that if you thought that you could get a solid fence, a stockade to match what you have currently and what you have replaced in the Evanston portion of your property, that's what you would go for? That's what you would prefer?
So, yeah, I think
Yeah.
we would prefer. And
So-
I was trying to, when I started this process, I didn't realize that we would have to apply, and I was just trying to follow the findings of the petition that were filed.
Right. So based on your mother's success in 1998, with applying for a 6-foot fence, but an open one. It would seem to me that as a property owner, you'd expect that, you know, there shouldn't be too much problem in getting the same thing approved once again. And I think in this case, Mr. Crown is, you know, he's going for an open fence because that's what we're requiring. And where Evan fence, and that the purpose is mostly to screen his property. And I think that a green screen in the end may be an improvement over a solid fence even. But I just wanted to find out if that was indeed your intention. And one of the reasons I asked that is because obviously from a security standpoint, you walk to the end of the fence and walk around it through your front yard and you're in. So there really is, the security aspect of it is very minimal. But the visual aspect of it, screening you from the road and screening the road from you, I can certainly understand that.
Yeah, part of the security would also be just the line of sight, and people can see, you know, if there's somebody in the yard and what they're doing. And, you know, if you have little kids out there, you know, you'd rather have it as secure as possible. I understand if someone can access the yard, it takes a more determined effort.
Any other questions for the applicant? Robert,
You're
you
muted,
have to-
Bob.
Bob, I'm muted.
Hi, this is Bob Sermon. The reason I've got some questions with this, I know it's been previously approved, is that we've had people come before us, and it's a property not probably only a block or two away where we hesitated to have a 6-foot gate open on the property. I think they had to go with 4 foot all along the lot line from my memory. So what I'm trying to figure out is what the hardship is here. I guess the topography is some of it, but a lot of times when we deal with these fence issues, when they are 6 foot, it has to do with streets that dead end into a fence area or something else. So I guess I'm on the fence on this one. So not sure right now. John looks like the only one that maybe got that one.
Any other comments for the applicant?
I would like to say that in the same vein as Mr. Sermon, I'm wondering what the hardship is. In the 22 years since Mrs. Crown applied for a variance, the shrubbery has grown in quite tall and provides, I would say, exceptional privacy and noise reduction without a fence. I can understand the desire for a fence in terms of keeping children corralled in a backyard and keeping outsiders out. But I think a 4-foot fence accomplishes that admirably. And I'm having a hard time understanding the need for the 6-foot fence. The new fence that you're seeking will not match the portion of the fence that's in Evanston. So that's not a basis in my book. That's not a hardship there. And the shrubs are so tall, it's impossible to see into the second floor of your home if you're a pedestrian on Sheridan Road. I was there today and I could barely see the house except for when I ducked through the bushes where the fence has fallen.
Mr. Crown, can you point to another property along Sheridan Avenue in a similar situation as you that has a 6-foot fence?
No, I'm not a student of, I don't have that tip of my fingers. I think the gentleman that said we would prefer to have a solid matches and is this in the same style as we've always had, that would be the preference. And didn't ask for that because I didn't think that would be successful based on what my mother had tried to do, and thought that it would be hopefully straightforward to kind of renew what she had petitioned for, and also to, I think the idea of growing vines and having the fence really fade into the background, having it at 6 foot, we could also grow vines on the Evanston portion of the fence, and so the height match, and I think it would look better and provide, a little bit more of a screen. The bushes in the back are behind the fence are kind of variable density, and they're green in some parts, and I'm just looking to establish a noise buffer, sound buffer, site buffer, as we've always called it.
Thank you. Would you like to, if there are no other comments on before we close this testimony, would you like to make other comments, and then we see if there's someone else that has sent in a email or other communication on this case? So please, you have the final word, Mr. Brown.
Well, as I just said, we have I think the 6 foot fence is something we strongly would like, and the noise from Sheridan Road is substantial, and the taller fence, the more that it will facilitate the growth of vegetation, and so it's strongly desired, and we've been there for 60 plus years, and are pretty familiar with the increase in traffic, and would like to maintain that property line in a way that allows us to continue to use that part of the yard.
Thank you. Ms. Roberts, have we had other comments on this case?
We have one guest joining us with a 773-458 phone number. I don't know if they are here for this case. If you are, now is the chance to speak. And if we're waiting for that person, Kate, do you have anybody who's gone through YouTube?
No, there are no comments submitted via YouTube.
Thank you. I think we're good, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I think we're ready to have a motion.
I'll make a motion. Move to recommend granting a request for a 2 foot fence height variation to permit the construction of a 6 foot tall open replacement fence in a front yard at 33 Canterbury Court in accordance with the plan submitted.
I'll second that.
I'm kind of torn on this. On the one hand, the fence is it's going to be an open fence. You're going to have all the shrubbery behind it, so it may not even be obvious that it's 6 foot tall. On the other hand, I don't see a hardship here at all, and I agree with all the comments that there's plenty of foliage there. You could put up arborvitae or something else that could be 10, 12 feet tall if that's what you're looking to accomplish. So I guess I understand that you'd like to have it. You're not going to be able to match the Evanston side. I don't see the hardship, so I'd like to hear what everybody else has to say, but I'm kind of leaning against.
So it's interesting. I came into this thinking, well, it's already been approved once, and the existing fence was there and was opaque and 6 feet tall. So it didn't seem like there was much of an issue in terms of precedent. On the other hand, I do understand what everybody is, those people who have spoken about the fact that the hardship is difficult to see. I would say that I'm leaning towards approving it for the reasons that I said, that, you know, there has been a fence there that is 6 feet tall and opaque, and that this was previously approved. But like you, I'll listen to what people have to say about it as well.
Well, I'll be glad to jump in at this point. I'm as well a little bit torn, but there are a couple of things that caused me to lean towards approving the application. The one thing we've not talked about is the ordinance is designed to keep fences in front yards at a certain height. And I know this is defined as a front yard, but quite honestly, if you were to ask the average person on the street whether this is the front yard or the side, they would say this is the side. This is not the front. So I start there, and this yard, call it the front or the side, is on Sheridan Road, which is a busy road. I next see that this is really an improvement over the wood fence. And so it's, you know, the family could just as easily, you know, put back the fence that fell down. It would be an eyesore, and there's not much that we could say about it. But this is going to be an improvement. The next step for me is that the fence does provide a foundation for putting in foliage, vines, which will increase the security and reduce noise to some extent from Sheridan Road. I mean, I think the applicant would be well advised to make those vines as thick as possible in order to make this really work in the manner that Mr. Crown has suggested. So I come down on the side of saying that this is an application that I think I will support.
Okay, this is Bob Sermon, and it's a difficult position for Mr. Crown. You know, he came here with the intent of just doing his best to put back what was there or do better, and now we're in this situation. My hesitation is that I know every case is looked at individually, but does it set some sort of precedent? In the past, I know we've had cases like this, and we've even on Ridge Avenue, I believe, where I know we discussed about if the fence really isn't providing full security to a yard and it's really more of a barrier, could it be set back? And I'm not trying to change the variation or be a designer, but I am, unfortunately. And, I think this would be an attractive fence if it was set back 2 or 3 feet from the sidewalk. You still had foliage right on the sidewalk. That's what you see if you drive further down Sheridan Road in I don't know, at least in Winnetka and other towns, you'll see foliage and the fence behind it. To me, it's I like the openness for vines. I don't know if it has to be that much of that looks like a stockade fence. Well, maybe not a stockade is the wrong word, but it's very cage-like, even though it's very open. So I guess I'd still like to hear others, but it's a difficult case.
I'd like to jump in at this point and say that I think a lot has changed in the 22 years since Mrs. Crown applied for her variance. And in the current environment, the applicant has basically just submitted what she submitted 22 years ago, and has, as a result, not demonstrated the need or the hardship related to a 4-foot fence. I think a 4-foot fence would handle vines or any other plantings quite well. It will provide the security that is desired for the backyard. And the existing landscaping, which has grown tremendously over 22 years, provides more than adequate privacy and noise reduction barrier, in my opinion. I will be voting against this unless I hear something far more persuasive.
Thank you. My view, the village has done its darndest, certainly over the past 22 years, and in the zoning code, to reduce these kinds of fences. The one that exists now, which will not be replicated, obviously, but it was still 6 feet tall. In this case, whatever you're going to call it, a front yard or a side yard adjoining a street, I drove up and down Sheridan, and I couldn't find another example. Similar situated lots where the side yard fronted Sheridan. Secondly, we had a case right up the street, if you recall, where the applicant wanted to install a 4-foot cast iron fence, very nicely done, but he had 2 gates, if you recall, and the 2 gates had sections, a small section that was higher than 4 feet. We approved it, but we discussed that increased height, even though it was just partial to the whole length of the lot. We were very concerned that it said. So I think, as I said here, if I look at the variation standards for fences, the extent to which fences of this same type sought by the applicant already exist in the immediate area and have been granted variations, none that I can think of. The orientation and proximity of the neighboring dwelling units and other structures to the proposed fence, that obviously is not an issue. And then the extent to which a fence of the same type sought by the applicant is for the replacement or repair of a previously or presently existing fence, that's yes. The length of time that a non-conforming fence has existed on the property prior to the application is a long time. Whether the fence permit was issued at the time the fence was constructed, if the fence being replaced was required to obtain such a permit. I'm sure that at the time this fence was originally constructed, a permit, or at least there may have been a permit requested, but I don't think the current zoning code applied then. So I think it is, we would be setting a terrible precedent if we permitted this variation, even though it's supposed to be open. And to me, and this is just a side comment in terms of the type of fence chosen, it almost looks like a chain link fence. And it's not really attractive. I will oppose this. Any other comments?
I just wanted to add that I thought that Mr. Falco's comment about the fact that this is in effect, a side yard and not a front yard and should be treated as such is one that very much rang true with me. I mean, the case is not 33 Sheridan Road, it's 33 Canterbury Court. So I'm not sure how or why it's the fact that part of the property, but it's certainly the fact that it's a front yard is not at all persuasive to me in terms of a standard that would cause us to deny this.
Any
I would
other
just
comments?
add to that, though, that we have in fact denied other applications similarly situated. I'm thinking of the case on Illinois earlier this year. It was the very same situation. And we denied it because we felt landscaping and a 4-foot fence would be more than adequate.
And I recall that. That was also a new fence. It wasn't replacing an existing 6-foot
True.
fence. And they hadn't received prior approval for a 6-foot fence.
That's
from
also true.
some other board. But I do see the similarities. I was trying to recall, I think there might be a house or two, those Spanish colonials on Central, right where they meet Sheridan, which have tall fences, brick and wrought iron. But most of the other ones, Reinhard, are probably 4-foot fences.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts from anyone? Are we ready to take a vote? Sorry. Okay, Ms. Roberts, I think we're ready to take a vote.
Mr. Colang,
No.
Mr. Pelletin,
I'll say yes.
Mr. Felkoff,
Yes.
Mr. Sermon,
You have to unmute, Bob.
Sorry, no.
Ms. Choke Urban,
No,
Chairman Schneider.
The chair votes no. So this, Mr. Crown, goes as a negative recommendation to the Board of Trustees, and I'm sure you will want to be there when they hear it on, I'll give you the date again. The meeting will be October 13th.
May I speak? May I speak?
I think we've taken all the testimony. I think you can make your case to the Board of Trustees, Mr. Crown.
I'm not allowed to, or
I don't think so. Ms. Roberts, I guess we can let him.
Yeah, if the applicant has a question or a
Go
comment.
ahead. Go ahead.
Obviously, I'm very disappointed and quite surprised, but the property also is kind of the gateway to Wilmette, with the Wilmette sign there and that stone monument. And I'm just wondering if there's a way to have a 6-foot fence that then steps down into that monument so that it really provides, I don't know, kind of the more of the look and tied into that historical monument. So so we get a little bit of our 6-foot fence, but we kind of blend it in with the marker there. Anyway, I'll stop talking.
Well, and Lisa, what are the Mr. Crown's options for coming back with a revised plan?
Well, you all have voted, so he is officially on his way to the village board. The village board can review a revised request if he'd like to modify his plan. They can choose to act on it, or they can choose to send it back to you all to review. I don't know what they would choose to do, but they could go either way. And we can talk, David, about what you're thinking about as an alternative, if you want to pursue that.
Okay, this is Bob Sermon. I move to authorize the chairman to prepare the report recommendations of the zoning board of appeals, case number 2020-C-27.
Second? Okay. Please call the vote.
Who was the second on? I'm sorry.
I second it.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Sermon,
You're voting, Bob.
Sorry.
You're voting on.
on the minutes.
You're frozen or muted or both? He's not frozen now. Need you to vote, Bob.
Okay, yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, something froze up.
Mr. Felkoff,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mr. Pelletin,
Yes.
Ms. Joker Urban,
Yes.
Chairman Schneider.
Yes. Thank you. And we can go on to the next case. Ms. Roberts.
Yep. Our next case is 2020 Z26, 1239 Gregory Avenue. This is a request for a 75.39 square foot rear yard total impervious surface coverage variation and a 151.38 square foot rear yard pavement impervious surface coverage variation to permit the construction of a parking lot.
Yeah, I think you're on mute, Ms. Lash.
Can you hear me okay?
Okay would be it. You're now muted again.
How about
Did I just?
I think you may be the source of this background noise. And
yeah, apologies. Here, let me hang up on the phone and see if I can talk through computer. Does this work? Does this work?
yes, that's better, I think.
Yes, it is for me.
Go ahead, Ms. Lash.
I think we may have lost her.
I think her connection created all that echo. I think she's trying to connect by phone, I think. There she is. Go ahead, unmute yourself and see what happens.
Okay, how about now?
Perfect.
Okay, what an auspicious start. Apologies. Thanks for your patience. Hi everyone. This is speaking, and sorry for the and thanks for moving off our request for a parking pad at 1239 Gregory. I'll just kind of top line what the request is in the background here. So we purchased this home after the engineering plans were designed and approved for the home. And so as we're going to build our parking pad, something that it's not meeting our needs for several reasons and several hardships that I've outlined in our request for application. The first one is we have a handicapped parent who lives with us very frequently, who's actually with us right now. And so we need a stable extended surface behind the home dedicated so that'll give him ample space for the parking. Furthermore, we do have street parking on Gregory, and we do often park on the street. Unfortunately, both of our cars have broken into, and we see that as a frequent occurrence in our neighborhood. I get alerts on my ring very often about within 0.5 miles away of break-ins into the car. So that's the reason we'd like to have our parking dedicated behind the home again for that reason. And then finally, we do have a grading issue where we have, after every storm, we have standing water that kind of pools, so that we're hopeful that when we build this parking pad, that with a sufficient dry well, that will eliminate the drainage issues that we currently have. And so my understanding is when we first kicked off our design for this, we did have some conversations with the village engineering department. And our understanding is that if you could put enough gravel into the dry wall, it's actually considered permeable or pervious. So that is our intent, and we have every reason to make this a pervious or permeable, even though it's deemed a hard surface coverage. So I just wanted to reiterate that I would hope that the zoning board may consider that also in their review. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Sorry.
I'm curious how the applicant arrived at the dimensions of the parking pad. It seems very generous to me to park a single car, and I'm struck by the fact that a smaller pad would not require a variance whatsoever from the village.
To add to that, Ms. Laux, I understand on page 1.4 that you have a permit to do a 11-foot parking lot. So you could go ahead as a matter of this permit, building permit.
Yes, so my understanding is we're approved to do the single parking pad, but we were hoping to be able to park the 2 cars there with ample room on either side for our parents to get in and out.
Could you also explain, I didn't quite understand the permeable system that you are talking about.
Yeah, so I'm not an engineer. But my understanding is that if you put a sufficient level of gravel into what I guess is considered a dry well, that will allow sufficient drainage for water, so that I guess my understanding is through conversations of our vendor with the engineers that they would consider that a pervious surface.
But won't the surface be concrete?
On top, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I just ask Ms. Roberts, is that correct, that if you have a sort of a dry well that you can put a concrete surface on top?
You know, I'm not really sure. It may very well be. I'm not sure.
Are we giving them credit for permeable surface?
We are not, because it was my understanding that there's an existing driveway and walks on the rear yard, which are not going to be the pervious surface. In order to get the 10% bonus, all of the flat surfaces need to be pervious. Yes.
Right now, as I understand, that whole side there is covered with wood chips, and cars are parked there now.
Yeah.
So there's no concrete surface in the side of the garage right now.
Correct. There's no concrete currently. There's pavers of a sidewalk between the garage and the home.
So,
Can you
I understand it. So you have a garage that can fit 2 cars, and you want to fit 2 more cars on a parking pad. They have 4-car access.
Yes, we can't. Right now we only fit 1 car in our garage, so we were hoping to park 2 behind on the parking pad.
Why is that? What else is in the garage?
Bikes and shelving for storage.
Can you tell me or help me to understand your elderly relative, how will they get from the parking space to the house?
Yeah, so they would go through they could either go through just the grass ahead, or they could go through the alley to the sidewalk.
Okay, so you're not intending to build a sidewalk from the parking space to the existing sidewalk?
No.
Let me ask a question, and this may be more for my the other members of the zoning board, and that is, would a paver system similar to that which other neighbors on this alley have, would that be considered permeable, or is that still considered an impermeable surface?
Something, if you're familiar with what the library did in their parking lot, that
Yes.
kind of system.
Right.
Yeah, the one at the library has a full drainage system below it, though, compared to pavers. I mean, this has come up for years that people want to put in pavers, and they say, well, there's joints between it, and then there's manufacturers that say, you know, that the brick is permeable. It's just not the case. And the difficulty we have when we're evaluating as a zoning board is the village hasn't approved anything stating that that's an acceptable replacement item to go with brick.
But,
So it's
but
still-
Isn't that the case, Lisa?
yeah,
Is that
there
your
is a,
understanding?
there's a 10% credit though, Robert, for permeable surfaces. So there must be some criteria for what is permeable.
Right,
Right.
non-mortared pavers can be qualified for the credit. It doesn't have to be a formal system like the library has. But and maybe I'm incorrect, but I don't believe the driveway apron is made of a paver surface, and all of the surfaces in the rear yard would need to be that in order for the credit to apply. And that would not negate the variation, they would still be released.
Okay.
This is Bob Sermon again. I guess, do you still have questions, Brad? I didn't want to cut you off.
No, go ahead. I'm going to come up with maybe another one, but please go ahead.
Okay. This is an issue that comes up quite often where, ideally somebody would want to have that whole area paved for basketball courts, for parking, for whatever reason. The thing that the zoning board has struggled with for years is the impervious issue and the flooding that we've got. Every time we approve these, we, kind of hurt ourselves on the impervious thing. And if some of the cases that come in front of us have a single car garage and they want a second space, here it's a more difficult sell for me since you've already got people. A garage that can accommodate 2 cars and a parking space. I think in the past, Lisa, couldn't you put it, you could put a separate structure in your yard so it wasn't in your rear yard, 10 by 10, that could be used for utility to free up the space in the garage. That's all up to the owner, but to request to have space to park 4 cars is it's a big reach especially for that area with the average size lot in West. So it's a difficult request for me.
We had a case a couple months ago, 8th and Lake, I think it was. There was a gentleman who was building a new house and wanted to change the driveway size and configuration and was intended to put in a drainage system and permeable pavers. His efforts, I think, were a little more extensive than yours, and they were certainly documented better. There's no evidence on the plans that I see at all of dry well or drainage system. And so I would say that if you had an engineer who could figure out how much water would be collected by the additional paving and, figured out a way to store that water and have it leach into your property at a later time, that would probably be more persuasive to me than we're going to add a lot of gravel.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm not an engineer. I did have the conversation with the vendor who was talking about the 237, I think, cubic feet that the dry well would be able to retain. And I do think that would help resolve the pooling water that we are having in the backyard. And I guess the way I think about it is if it were be able to be considered as such as, it would significantly help us. For that issue.
If it looks like, Ms. Lash, that you don't have a wholehearted support from the board, and we can informally poll ourselves, but would it be possible for you to get an engineer or architect to do a more, as Mr. Pelleton asked, a more detailed plan as to how you expect not to increase the runoff from this pad into the village sewer, because in that location, the sewers are combined storm and sanitary. So if you could do that, maybe you'd have a more positive reception. If you could do that, maybe even for the next meeting or some future meeting. I don't know what the rest of the board members think.
Okay.
I'm not sure that, well, I can say that as of the content of this application, currently I'm not in support of it. I think it's an excessive request, given that a two-car garage does exist on the property and that it is a relatively new residence. Given that we rejected the request on Lake Avenue for the new construction, the extension of concrete there with a very elaborate water retention and drainage system, I would be hard pressed to support something similar here, having voted one way already on another similar situated property. I don't think it would change my vote.
Thank you.
This is Bob Sermon. I concur with Maria. I mean, it kind of explains itself. If there's already water issues in the backyard, now you're going to pave more property. I don't think, I'm an architect, I'm not an engineer. I have done some of this planning. It would have to be quite a large detention tank to accommodate a backyard that's already got issues and this. And I just think it's a big request. Sometimes some of the requests, everyone's different. Every project, every application's looked at separately. But some of the applications we've had have been, like I said, a single car garage, parking pad, and they are on Lake Street and they don't have any parking. Here you've got street parking and you've got a two-car garage and a single pad. So
yeah, you know, I agree with Bob and Maria as far as, you know, I don't see the hardship here, but I do agree with Mr. Pelleton. I think that, you know, if the applicant wants to continue this and, you know, come back with a more fulsome presentation, you know, we had that case on off of Sheridan Road where they were looking to put that fence wall up, and they had those two retaining wells, and then the wall, you know, and they had a system, and, you know, that seemed to make sense. And if something like that, you know, can be at work here, you know, I might look, you know, differently at this at that point in time. So if the applicant wants to do that, I'm all for it, giving them time to do that.
Any other comments?
Well, I'll make one last comment. Since I'm new to the board, I'm not burdened by earlier votes, but I am persuaded by what the board members have said, particularly what Mr. Sermon said in terms of trying to figure out what to do with the water. If there's water there right now, and it looks like the wood chips are a little bit higher than the yard, if you now start adding an impervious surface, I can't imagine that it'll get better. The water is now going to end up in the alley or somewhere else. And so before we give the applicant hope, I guess it's fair to say, at least I don't see even an engineering drawing changing my thoughts at this point.
Thank you. Well, it's like you have the last word, but you can see the sentiment of many of the board members. So, but I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, thanks for the consideration. And it does appear that there might be a disconnect between the engineering department within the village and the zoning regs or what have you, because of the early conversations that we had, and we're told that this would significantly improve the drainage problem with the way that they would be able to regrade and put the gravel pit into the dry well to help the drainage. It sounds like there's a disconnect there. we'd be happy to look at some further engineering plans, but if I counted correctly, it sounds like less people would be convinced by that than actually would, if I counted right. It sounds like that would be not a viable path forward to bring back the engineering plans more formalized.
Is that, should we not give it a vote? I would, for myself, if the engineering drawings were such that it would convince us, or at least the engineer would affirm that runoff would not be greater than it is now, and it would also solve the ponding problem. I could look at it again, and maybe you could reduce the size of the pad as well at the same time. But I don't want to give you unnecessarily spend money when most of us here would even in that case not be sympathetic to this.
Yeah, I wanted to add one more thing. I mean, I'm sure there's an engineering solution that exists which would result in a net decrease in runoff, even with additional pavement. I don't know if Ms. Lash is interested in paying for that, not just the plan, but the actual implementation of it. And I have no idea how extensive that requirement would be. But I would really be surprised if, despite what people have said, if the engineers stated that there would be less runoff, that there'd be less water leaving your property with the new system and the increased parking space. Surprised that people would vote against that. There'd have to be obviously some other reason.
You were Ryder, you were blocking off there for a moment. Did you say?
I'm sorry. My computer is now doing strange things, and I'm only seeing one person at a time, and I'm, going in and out. But my point was that obviously an engineer can design a solution that will result in a reduced amount of runoff, even with increased paver. Impervious concrete, and that it would seem to me that would remove that as a rationale for not approving this particular request. There may be other reasons to not approve the request, but that's one that seems like it's within the applicant's control if they choose to spend the money to do so.
Okay, we're obviously not going to take a vote, Ms. Lash. So if you've heard the sentiment, and if you would like to withdraw this, is that what needs to happen, Ms. Roberts? They withdraw this application and resubmit one at a later date?
I wouldn't recommend that. I think the applicant needs to decide whether she would like to have you proceed with a vote tonight, or whether she would like to postpone to a specific date and come back with some, additional information or a revised plan or whatever it may be.
Okay, if we postpone, obviously we would do our due diligence, engineering firms, and assess at that point we believe it's cost prohibitive or we're able to do it. Would we just withdraw then? Would that
I would suggest that you work with Ms. Roberts and the village to set a date in the future. Is that all right?
But I would note, if we don't continue it to a specific date tonight, the applicant will need to redo notice whenever that time may be. We can always table it again if it's not ready on the date that we table it to tonight.
How much time do you think you would need, Ms. Lash?
At least, a month or so. Yeah.
Or 6 weeks, just to make sure that you have enough time to get all the stuff together. Let's choose 6 weeks from now. What would they
First meeting in November.
Okay.
I guess my question is, are all minds made up, or do we have some I just want to, it's a lot of energy and effort. I just want to take advantage of it.
I'd be open-minded.
I appreciate that.
I would
think
certainly.
I think Ryrie and Reinhardt would be as well, from what I can hear. So.
Yeah, I would as well.
Also.
Okay. So,
And we're missing one board member tonight.
Appreciate just open-mindedness to
So you have we set a date, Ms. Roberts?
We've got October 21st and November 4th would be open.
October 21st.
Do you have a preference, Ms. Lash? October 21st?
October 21st. And then Lisa, can I just work with you on the back end for whatever we both make it by that time?
Do we need to
Do
take
we need a motion to table it to October 21st?
Yeah, move to continue case number 2020-Z-26 to October 21st, 2020.
I'll second that.
Okay, let's call for a vote, Ms. Roberts.
Mr. Colang,
Yes.
Mr. Pelletin,
Yes.
Mr. Falco,
Yes.
Mr. Sermon,
Yes.
Ms. Choke Urban,
Yes.
Chairman Schneider.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. I think we can go on to the next case.
Our final case is 2020 Z25, 2133 Greenwood Avenue. This is a request for a 0.02-foot side yard setback variation and a variation from the requirement that a single-family dwelling with 2 or more enclosed parking spaces maintain at least 2 enclosed parking spaces to permit the subdivision of the property and retention of the existing home. And the applicant is here.
You're on.
Good evening. My name is Mike Murdoch. I live at 939 Pomona Road, and I'm here on behalf of 2133 Greenwood Avenue. As Ms. Roberts had stated, I'm seeking zoning relief in 2 ways. I'm looking for a 0.02-foot side yard setback. In practical terms, that's less than 1/4 of an inch if my math is correct. And I'm seeking that variation for an existing structure that we do not intend to alter. So the house was built that way originally, and there's no plan to extend that further into the side yard setback. In addition, I'm seeking a variation to allow for a single attached garage space as opposed to 2 enclosed spaces as required by the code. When this house was built, it was built with a single attached garage, as is common throughout Kenilworth Gardens. At some point in the future, a garage was built on the addition to the adjoining property, and the original garage was enclosed family room. I'm seeking to revert the house back to its original form, which is in keeping with the character of the neighborhood, and it's actually very similar to the house located down the street at 2201 Greenwood, because we intend to subdivide the 2 lots. It's a 100-foot lot in total. There are 2 separate pins, 2 separate tax bills, and the village did approve a subdivision in the past, which had expired. We'll be back in front of the Plan Commission next month to complete that as well. The intent is to do this to allow us to preserve the existing house on the 1 lot where it was originally sited. From a practical standpoint, when the house was built, no thought was given to how the house would be able to provide a 2-car garage on the standard 50-foot lot, again, as is common throughout Kenilworth Gardens. And there's no practical way to create a 2-car garage on the 50-foot lot. That's why we're seeking the variation. I'd be happy to go through the 7 standards of review, but of course I did provide that in the packet. If you'd like, I will do that. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer questions.
You said you provided the standards of review?
Yes, in my application write-up, I provided an overview, and then I addressed the 7 standards.
I got it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Now, you said that on 50-foot lots, it's not possible to put 2-car garage? I see it all over the place.
Of course, it can be done if we were to demolish the home and build a new home on the 50-foot lot. The issue is, as is common throughout Kenilworth Gardens, there are some homes, of course, with 2-car attached or detached garages, but there are many, many homes in the neighborhood that were built with a single attached garage. The way this house is sited, as noted, we're requesting a 1/4-inch variation on the west side. Not possible to put a driveway in a less than 5 space. On the east side, we also don't have sufficient space to get around to the back of the house. The distance from the property line is less than 8 feet, and there is a chimney that encroaches into that space, and then there's a window well behind it as well. So there's not a practical way to get back to the back of the property, given how the house was originally built, because it was built with a 1-car garage when that was a permitted use. Now the houses throughout Kenilworth Gardens that have a single-car garage are legal non-conforming uses.
Right,
And
we understand.
if this had not had the lot next door, it would have existed and continued to exist as a legal non-conforming use with the 1-car garage.
Okay, tell us what you intend to do. Where do you intend to put that 1-car garage on the west side?
Yes, so I did provide a plat of survey, which basically showed where the driveway would go, the curb cut would be moved to the west side of the property. And as I said, if you have a visual picture of the house, as you're from the street looking at the house on the right side, there is a family room that has been enclosed that originally was a garage, and we would put the garage back where it was originally when the house was built. Thank you, Lisa, for pulling that up for me.
Was there always a second floor on that portion above the garage?
I believe there was, but again, that predates my specific knowledge about the house. But again, I am very familiar with 2201 Greenwood, which is similar. And again, I believe that house also had a second floor above it. Both of those houses when they were built.
Now, clearly, if this were a new house, just like what you intend to build on the other lot, that other lot will require a 2-car garage. Is that correct?
Absolutely, and any development on the open lot will fully comply.
Now, why, to your understanding, does this situation require need a variation?
Again, if the 7th standard of review the 6th standard of review deals with the question whether the variation will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood and will be consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies set forth in the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan does seek a variety of different types of housing, seeks to preserve existing housing stock. And so I believe that this is necessary in order to preserve the house. I'm not aware of any way that the house could be preserved in an economical manner and have a 2-car garage. The rest of the space facing the front of the house does have a basement under it. And as the architects on the board know, anything can be done when money is no object, but from a practical standpoint, to try to reconfigure the front of the house to allow for a 2-car attached garage is just not practical, and it wouldn't make sense to preserve the house. My goal is to preserve the house, and I would require this zoning relief in order to preserve the house.
So have you bought the house? Have you bought the property?
I have not bought the property. I have a contract and a zoning contingency with the contract.
Okay. So Greenwood, I mean, you drive up Greenwood, there are a lot of cars on Greenwood. So, in the village, obviously, we work hard when somebody has a 1-car garage to convert to a 2-car garage, and they need variances. We try to work with them as much as we can. You're going in reverse here, and you're putting another car potentially on what's already a very crowded street. The 2 cars can't pass each other on unless there's openings. So that kind of seems to fly. in the face of, what the village is trying to achieve overall here.
I think that's a fair point. I think there are competing goals. I think the village does seek to preserve the existing housing stock. And so it would do that. But yes, you are correct. If you have a one-car attached garage, you could put another car off the street in the driveway, as is commonly done in Kenilworth Gardens. But the car in the garage cannot be accessed without moving the other car. And so that does definitely create the situation where there's a possibility that there would be additional street parking. That's correct. Yes, sir.
I'm looking.
Can I ask?
Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to ask, did you consider the possibility of removing the family room cum garage entirely and using that space for a driveway to access a two-car garage in the rear of the lot, as the next door neighbor has?
Unfortunately, there is more house behind the family room / garage, and the only bathroom on the first floor is immediately behind it. And again, I don't believe it's practical to have a house without a bathroom on the first floor. Is it possible that there could be another configuration where you could run new plumbing and a new stack and find another spot for the powder room? It may be possible, but again, we're getting into a situation where diminishing returns, and in a nutshell. And to your point, I've also seen homes where you have two tandem garage where one spot's in front of the other. And again, I just don't believe that's practical at this house because of the location of the bathroom behind it. But we did consider that, and we did look at it.
I'm looking at the standards of review briefly, if I could. The 1B says that the plight of the property owner was not created by the owner and is due to unique circumstances.
Yes.
You are clearly creating this situation. It wasn't by subdividing the lots. The second one is the difficulty or hardship is peculiar to the property in question and is not generally shared by other properties classified in the same zoning district used for the same purposes. The difficulty or hardship resulting from the application of this ordinance would prevent the owner from making reasonable use of the property. However, the fact that the property could be utilized more profitably with the variation than without the variation should not be considered grounds for granting variation. I think you meet the other standards of review, but I have some problem with those three.
I'd love to speak to that. First of all, the plight of the property owner was not created by the owner. It was due to unique circumstances. The plight is that the house was originally designed with a one-car garage, and it was a legal conforming structure when it was built. And then when the zoning law changed, it became a legal non-conforming structure. There are no other houses in Kenilworth Gardens that have an adjacent lot next to them where a garage could be sited. The fact that a prior owner built a garage, not knowing zoning law would change at some point in the future, not allowing them to revert back, I don't believe that I created the plight in that sense. Secondly, standard 3, the difficulty or hardship is peculiar to the property in question, is not generally shared by other properties classified in the same zoning district that were used for the same purpose. Again, this is the only home in Kenilworth Gardens that has a 100 lot where the garage can be placed on a second. There are no other houses in Kenilworth Gardens where the garage is, and again, when I say second lot, what I mean is there is in fact a second parcel, second pin, second tax bill, if you will. There's no other situation in Kenilworth Gardens like that. And then you would reference the standard 4, difficulty or hardship resulting from the application of the zoning ordinance would prevent the owner from making reasonable use of the property. However, the fact that the property could be used more profitably with the variation, without the variation, shall not be considered grounds for granting the variation. You know, I've over the years, I've been before the zoning board a number of different times, and I've made a statement similar to the one that I'm I'm about to make. And I want to make sure that it doesn't come off as me saying, well, if you don't do this, I'm going to do that. That's not my intent at all. What I'm trying to explain is the likelihood, whether it's me or the current owner or another owner, will in all probability demolish this property if the variation is not granted, because that's actually the most profitable use for the property. I think in current market conditions, unambiguously, the highest and best use of the property is 2 new construction single-family homes. And of course, that can be done by right, and that may ultimately be, what occurs on this property. But again, it's my understanding that the village seeks to preserve existing housing stock, and I personally believe the only way that the existing housing stock on this property can be preserved is by allowing the property to revert back to its original form when it was built, similar to many other properties throughout Forest Gardens allow for the 1-car attached garage. So again, when I say that, when I speak to profitability, I don't believe this is the most profitable use of the parcel. I think 2 new construction single-family homes is what's most profitable. Thank you.
This is Bob Sermon. I understand what you're trying to do here, Mike. The difficulty I have, though, is from past projects that are on Greenwood and other streets in that area, is that a lot of times people won't use their garage for a car even. People have come in and they say, oh, well, we need to be able to make our driveway wider or whatever to accommodate 2 cars because we can't even use our garage. So, the difficulty I have is it goes against what the village is asking, but at the same time, there are plenty of homes that have a single car garage. I didn't drive up and down the street looking at it today, but in the past, where the second car is in the driveway, and the driveway here is sufficient probably to fit 2 cars. So it's not one of those houses where the garage is so close to the street that you can just squeeze in 1 car and the second one has to be on the street. Here you really have room, it appears, to get 2 in the driveway. And then the owner just has to, move them back and forth if they need to get to each one of them, keep them tandem. So it's like all the cases tonight, it's a more difficult one. I just want to make sure that, so I understand the plan that you're showing right now, that the garage would be all the way to the west, and then the entrance would probably be right in the corner there next to it. Is that true?
That's correct, and thank you for pointing this out. Great point. The entrance to the garage is set over 40 feet back from the sidewalk. And I believe, I didn't look at this before the meeting, I apologize, but I believe a standard size parking space is 8.5 feet by 18 feet. Obviously, yes, there's enough room for 2 cars to be parked in the driveway. But someone had made the comment earlier that if the 1 car is closer to the house, there's a spot in the garage. Yes, the car sort of blocking it, there won't be a space to go around it. So people would have to move the cars, but your point is absolutely correct, that I believe it would be possible to have 2 parking spaces off the street in addition to the garage, given the way the house was built and given that the garage is set back from the front facade of the rest of the house. That's correct, and thank you for pointing that out.
I would just say, practically speaking, tandem parking really doesn't function very well. But what people tend to do is they tend to widen the driveway so they can park 2 cars in parallel rather than one behind the other. If you see that up and down the street, they widen the driveway and then park 2 cars adjacent to each other.
Chairman, I sincerely apologize. I did not hear the beginning of your comments. There was some feedback.
Well, I think tandem parking, as you described, 2 cars, one behind the other, really in practicality, it rarely works very well. You'll have to shuttle cars back and forth. And What I was saying is that what people tend to do, and I assume they get approval, is they widen the driveway in order to be able to park two cars next to each other.
I have not done the calculations with respect to the front yard impervious surface coverage. I can tell you that I would certainly be open to that if it's possible, but I haven't done those calculations. From a practical standpoint, also, though, it's important to remember when you look at the drawing that Lisa had pulled up before, the front entrance to the house is next to the garage. And so even though the diagram sort of shows an arch of concrete kind of going into the side of the house, the front door is there and it's not at the part furthest to the north. And so parking two cars side by side, you would still have to get around those cars in order to access the house.
No, I'm not suggesting it. I'm just commenting on tandem parking.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
This is Bob Sermon again. Mike, I've got another question. How many square feet is the house? If you were to,
yes,
I guess I'm comparing it. The difficulty I have, first of all, is, you know, a lot of times it's difficult to grant variances when you know that the project is being done as a development and not for an individual. That's always been an issue. But I guess, you know, when you talk about using or maintaining the existing housing stock, it comes down to, okay, if you could build 3,500, this one's only, you know, 2,800, so it's on the smaller side. So then that's kind of a positive to maintain the housing stock. But
yes, thank you for the question. The permitted floor area is 3,429.36 feet. And I did the FAR calculation, and I know that Lisa has it, I hope. With the Zoom call, I'm not in my office actually, and I don't have that document with me. I did provide it. Lisa, is it possible for you to find that for me? Or do I need to take a break and try to pull that out?
No, I've got it here.
Great, thank you so much.
Yep. The existing home as proposed with the breezeway and stuff is 2749.
could you repeat that, please?
Sure. The proposed house with the breezeway removed in the garage, 2749.
Okay. Is it your intent then to add to the house, Mike? I mean, there's still square footage there.
No, it's not my intent to add to the house, and it's not obvious to me how it would be productive to add to the house. Of course, you could always do an addition in the back, but no, my intent is not to add to the house, to leave the house at 2750, you know, approximately 700 feet less than what's permitted under the zoning ordinance.
Mike, how much of a rehab will you be doing on this house? A lot of cases that come before the zoning board are such extensive rehabs that for all practical purposes, they're considered to be brand new construction. What is your intention here?
Yeah, a good question. I don't live in Kenilworth Gardens now, but I've lived and owned multiple properties in Kenilworth Gardens. I find the housing stock in Kenilworth to be excellent. Much of it was built, you know, mid-century or a little bit earlier, and I find this house to be in excellent condition. So I do plan to make some cosmetic renovations, update the kitchen, update bathroom, but I don't plan wholesale redevelopment of the floor plan of the configuration. Say 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath house. I found that's what people are looking for right now. So I do not plan, I certainly plan to invest in the property and update it, but I don't expect to do a gut to the studs, clear everything out renovation. That's not my intention. Thank you for the question.
Mike, I'm trying to understand, the house is going to be vacated by the current residents of the house?
Yes.
And so there will be then a house with no family room?
It will be a house with no family room, that's correct, but it has a large dry basement. It also has a very large living room. And I think, as we all know, living rooms aren't used the way they were in the past. And so the living room is really effectively going to be the family room. It has large windows on the front of the house, a nice fireplace. So I would argue it's really not going to have a living room, but it will have a family.
All right. And what was the purpose of taking down the tree, which is exactly where the driveway would now be for that one-car garage? Was that taken down in order to prepare for the zoning board meeting so that there would not be a tree in the middle of the driveway?
I honestly can't speak to that. I was not aware that a tree had been removed. I do believe the current property owner is on the call. He may be able to answer that.
I'm on the call and I can answer that.
But
Thanks,
but
Rob.
before you do, Rob, I would just like to say, this is the first that I've heard about it. I have no knowledge. Thanks, Rob.
My name is Robert Garrison. I'm the owner of the property at 2133 Greenwood, and I have a contract to sell the property to Mike Murdoch.
Mr. Garrison, did I swear you in before? Did I swear you in?
I did while you were doing it, but yes, I'm under oath and
Thank you.
telling you the truth.
Thank you. Go ahead.
The tree that we did remove earlier this year had nothing to do with this. Actually, my discussions with Mike came after the tree was already gone. The issue came up as the neighbor immediately to the west of us. The tree was very close to the property line, and the branches hung over their driveway and was dripping sap on their cars. And our neighbor asked us to trim that side of the tree so that it would not have the sap dripping on their cars. I thought first that would look pretty ugly, and second of all, I never really liked the tree anyway. So we took the tree down instead, as a way to solve that problem. And it was, I don't know, a month or more later, something like that, when we had our first discussion with Mike Murdoch about buying the property. So no, it has nothing to do with this. It was related to a discussion with my neighbor.
On that subject, and I'll be honest with you, this is the first that I've heard about that, and I apologize that I wasn't aware. But I know that when I've had cases before the zoning board in the past with Ronald Knox or with Michigan Shores, sometimes there are conditions that are imposed. I'm more than happy to agree to a condition where additional trees are planted. I think everyone here knows I'm on the park board, and park people like trees. So I'm more than happy to commit to planting trees if there's a concern about that. I'd be happy to stipulate it.
Okay, so any other questions for the applicant? Hearing none, I think we're ready to close the testimony and make a motion.
Kate, do you see anybody in the YouTube chat?
Oh, that's right. Sorry about that.
No, there are no comments on YouTube.
Thank you. There's nobody else joining us either.
So we're all set to move to make a motion, right?
Yes, thank you.
I'll move to recommend granting request for a 0.02 side yard setback variation and a variation from the requirements that a single-family dwelling with 2 or more enclosed parking spaces maintain at least 2 enclosed parking spaces to permit the subdivision of the property and retention of the existing home at 2133 Greenwood Avenue in accordance with the plan submitted.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Kalang.
So obviously the variation of the 0.02 is not an issue. And but in my mind, the elimination of a 2-car garage is. And while the highest and best use for this property may be tearing it down and putting up 2 houses, Mr. Murdoch kept saying that the village wants to maintain the housing stock. Well, you drive around the village, there's houses being torn down all over the place. And there's no guarantee that whoever buys this house after it's renovated might be in front of the zoning board saying, hey, I want to do a 700 square foot addition to the house because I'm entitled. So it becomes disjointed in that when I look at it that way. And I have a hard time, given the amount of parking that's already on Greenwood and all those Kenilworth subdivision streets there. So I'm leaning against, but I'm happy to hear what everybody else has to say.
This is Bob Sermon. I concur with John in some ways. It's like I said this evening, a lot of difficult cases. But at the same time, I mean, Mr. Garrison could sell it to somebody else and they could tear it down. It's not a threat, but given the value of the lots, you could see that happening very easily. So I'm struggling with this one. I'd like to hear what other people have to say. It does go against what the village is kind of, walking papers or however you want to describe it. You've given us.
Bob, towards that end, you're going to have a vacant lot. They're going to be able to build the full FAR that's allowed on that lot.
On the
second lot.
Yeah.
And on this lot, maybe building a home, that doesn't, with a bigger FAR that has a 2-car garage and everything and utilizes the space better, may be a better alternative than what we have. So, obviously making money on a project isn't something that we take a look at.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah,
I agree.
It's a hardship. It's a hardship that's been brought on by the applicant. So I guess I'd like to hear what other board members have to say.
I agree with both John and Bob, and I'm particularly persuaded by Reinhardt's recitation of the standards of review and the fact that in 2 of the cases, the plight is being created by the applicant. And in the 3rd, we are working against the policy on the parking front. And for better or worse, that's what's before us. And I'm leaning against supporting this motion.
Anyone else want to comment?
Well, I'll step in. I share the same concerns that other people have mentioned. And of course, I have and Reinhardt knows this, I have a short-term concern, which is I live just 4 doors down, so I will have to deal with the construction on the street at some point in time. But setting that temporary inconvenience aside, I still remember my first meeting on the zoning board when it was, I think, John who reminded me that the village is trying to get people to stop parking on the street and that there's value to having 2-car garages. And yes, we are losing a 2-car garage here, but as Mike pointed out and others have pointed out, this is a driveway which will accommodate tandem 2 cars. I have one of those 1-car garages. The house that you mentioned at 2201 is another one that does have the 1-car garage. And like them, we use our garages for storing bicycles and other paraphernalia. We could never, on the best day, put a car in the garage. But what we have done is gotten our cars off the street by having either tandem or side-by-side. I don't think there's room here for side-by-side, but there is room to have the 2 cars. So I'm torn. I absolutely hear what those who are saying we're losing the parking in the garage are saying, but I am at this point leaning towards going ahead and voting in favor of the applicant's request.
Thank you. Mr. Pelican?
Well, I agree that I think that in this case, the fact that the applicant is looking to subdivide the property is what's causing the hardship. On the other hand, if I'm trying to balance all of the interests, I agree with what Brad said about being able to get the cars off the street on the driveway. And I am mindful of the fact that the likely alternative to, if this is denied, is that that house gets demolished and a new one gets put in its place. And I think that there is some value to maintaining that house in a somewhat altered, or perhaps altered back to its original state. So I'm leaning towards approval or voting in favor of this. But it is certainly not a simple or clear-cut kind of thing. And I do believe that everyone else has made some very valid points about the fact that a two-car garage is the standard, and that this is probably going to qualify as new construction. And as a result, they would be required to provide a two-car garage. So it's a balancing act between, do we want to try and preserve this house, or do we think that the two-car garage is more important? And that's it.
Thank you. And I don't know how well you know. I know Brad knows Kenilworth Gardens, and I live here too. But if you recall, the southwest corner, Chestnut and 21st, was a 100-foot wide lot that had a historic home. In fact, it was apparently it was transported from the 1933 World Exposition, and I think somebody, the developer, managed to convince someone to save the external panels, which were of some kind of metal or something. So that was a historic home, and in this case, eventually tore it down and saved some parts of it, and then they built two houses adjacent to each other, each with two-car garages. So I don't know that this house has any historic significance at all. And so again, the plight here is proposed to be created by the buyer, the potential buyer. So I have difficulty in supporting this. So any other comments by anyone? Hearing none, are we ready to take a vote? Okay, let's go ahead. Oh no, we need to yeah, I think we're ready for a vote, right, Ms. Roberts?
Yes, sorry, I just couldn't get to unmute there. Mr. Colang?
No.
Mr. Sermon?
Yes.
Mr. Falcoff?
Yes.
Mr. Pelican?
Yes.
Ms. Joker Urban?
No.
Chairman Schneider?
The chair votes no, so this will go as a negative recommendation, and so the date of the board meeting is on October 13th.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good night.
Go ahead, guys.
I move to authorize the chairman to prepare the report and recommendation for the zoning board of appeals for 2020-Z25.
Second.
I'll second that.
Okay. Ms. Roberts?
Mr. Sermon?
Yes.
Mr. Pelican?
Yes.
Mr. Falcoff?
Yes.
Mr. Colang?
Yes.
Ms. Joker Urban?
Yes.
Chairman Schneider?
Yes. Okay, I think we have one more item.
Move to approve the meeting minutes for the Zoning Board of Appeals for Wednesday, July 1st, 2020.
Second.
Please call the roll for the vote.
Mr. Colang,
Yes.
Ms. Joke Urban,
Yes.
Mr. Felkoff,
Yes.
Mr. Pelleton,
Yes.
Mr. Sermon,
Yes.
Chairman Schneider.
Yes. Thank you. Ms. Roberts, have we heard from anyone else that wishes to speak on anything?
We have not.
Okay, can we have a move to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
I'm sorry, who's the second?
John.
John, thank you. And before you go, Ms. Joke Urban,
Yes.
Mr. Colang,
Yes.
Mr. Felkoff,
Yes.
Mr. Pelleton,
I choose to abstain. No, yes.
Mr. Sermon,
Yes.
Make him stay on.
Chairman Schneider.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much, guys and women. I think we're
Thank
all
you.
set.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.